Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. The Parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the Parrot. Parrot TV. 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 Parrot TV.
Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Hi, welcome to New York Parrot's Literary Corner. I'm Dustin Pickering, your noble and honest host. I have an excellent program today as we reach past our 200th episode milestone here at episode 204. If you guys have been paying attention, we're going to do our anthology quite soon here in December 1st. It'll be release date. So get your ready to do your pre-orders pretty soon. We'll announce that. And we're sending out emails as of the last week or so to those that we're going to invite for the anthology. So be prepared to hear from us if you've been a guest or if you've been published on the platform at newyorkparrot.com. Today we have Sushant Thapa, who holds a master's degree in English literature from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India. He is a Nepalese poet from Biratnagar, Nepal, and is the author of two poetry collections, The Poetic Burden and Other Poems, published by Authors Press, New Delhi, India, in 2020, and Abstraction and Other Poems, published by Inspired in 2021 from England. His English poems are featured in Truval Review, Lighthouse Ecophonic Magazine, Portugal, International Times, United Kingdom, New York Parrot, New York, USA, My Republica in Kathmandu, Nepal, the Kathmandu Post in Kathmandu, Nepal, Sahito Bilingual Literary Magazine in Bangladesh, Indian Periodical in India, Ponder Savant in California, USA, Gray Thoughts, New Jersey, USA, the Gorkha Times, Kathmandu, Nepal, the Piker Press, the Thorian Poetry Journal, Offline Thinker, Sahitya Post, Atunas Poetry, EKL Review, Harbinger Asylum, Dumpster Fire Press, Inspired Magazine, Seed Courier, Asherang, Kabita Minar, Suradaya, Visible Magazine, Willa Wash, the Beatnik Cowboy, Synchronized Chaos Journal, Viscorbazine Blog, that's a very strange title. I had a hard time reading that, sorry. Medusa's Kitchen and As It Ought to Be magazine. 4 English poems written by Sushant have been translated into Uzbek, the language of Uzbekistan, and published in the online literary magazine Notaribogum of Uzbekistan. He has also been anthologized in 3 English poetry collections entitled Pandemic Poetry 2020 and an anthology of poetry for children. One of Sushant's poems has appeared in the Literary Parrot anthology published by none other than Transcendent Zero Press and New York Parrot of New York, USA. One of his poems, entitled Festivities, has been included in school books used to teach English to grade 6 students in Nepal. Sushant has also written and published flash fiction and short stories from Kitab and Borderless Journal, Singapore. His 3 poems were translated in Latin American Spanish language and published in the magazine Trinando of Mexico. Sushant is currently working on his first novel. Thanks for joining us, Sushant. How are you doing today?
Thank you, sir. I'm really good, and it's glad to be part of this program,
Excellent to have you, and I'm anticipating an interesting conversation. I'm curious about your novel. How long have you been working on it, and what does it cover? What are you writing about?
I'm writing about some kind of, physical disability.
Okay.
Yeah, so a kind of, So I thought about this idea, and then I kind of researched also. So it affects people, and so it will be very soon to reveal it right now. So about a month I have been working, and I only finished 10 pages barely.
Oh wow! So you know,
So
after
the
a month, the
character,
page is quite
I found
steady.
my characters. Yeah.
So how when do you anticipate releasing the novel? Do you have a plan for are you sitting down kind of like disciplined, like in terms of like, okay, I write so many words a day, or is it just whenever the work is available to your mind?
Initially, it was like 1,000 words a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was writing, and I had to, I was just doing some teaching work, and I had to stop it. So now I'm just thinking about it and writing, not regularly, but maybe within 2 year time I will finish it. I think 2 to 3 years. It will take time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I look forward to seeing that happen and seeing who publishes it. So, sort of a generic question. Do you remember when you started writing and what prompted you to do that?
So when I started writing, it was in Nepali language. So when I was about 15 years, I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was in a diary, just some personal collections, and it did not get published, and I did not try also publishing it. And after that, after completing my master's in 2019, so I started writing in English, and I started sending them for publication
Mm-hmm.
in My Republica, and in the later on in the Kathmandu Post, in the print also. So the publication, it kind of motivated me to write more. So after 2019, I've been writing regularly, and the first book, The Poetic Burden and Other Poems. So this book, it was a kind of my search for meaning, through poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Search for meaning, and the search for the self. So initially I gave utmost time to each and every poem.
Mm-hmm.
So and I was regularly writing it for 1 year or so, and then I collected those poems in this book. So, and overall I think so the collection, it stands out. So, and many people have commented also in the review and all.
Mm. Right. So what would you say you describe your themes in your poetry as? Do you write regularly about certain topics?
No, not regularly about certain topics, but random topics, like I first write some lines, a word strikes me, and I write about that, and I later on give title to the words, and try to work on the craft, try to work on the similes or metaphors or imageries. So I usually work with similes. So the like.
Mm-hmm.
I usually work with the similes, and it leads me to imageries, and it leads me to a whole new kind of experience. So
Interesting. I'm a big metaphor person myself. I haven't met someone who uses too many similes or uses simile more often than other poetic devices. Is there a reason you do that, or is it just come naturally?
yeah, I know. I mean, like it is a certain craft. So when you just write, if there is no simile or if there is no metaphor, the writing, it becomes. I think that poetry is something else. Poetry is not the regular writing which you do, obviously. So it's different from prose also. So it has this literal sense which alleviates the meaning of the words. As Walt Whitman also said, that certain alleviation quality. So he is the father of free verse. So, and I have his collection, Leaves of Grass. So I was reading it.
With Walt Whitman. Mm-hmm.
Walt Whitman, yeah. So it's about naturalistic perception, I think, and it's about America. So so there is the simile and metaphor. It's there is some different between normal writing and the writing with simile. So I think poems should have that. So each poem, while I work on each poem, I give each poem a time so that I can work on simile. So there is no any specific reason, but so that it sounds literal and it alleviates.
Interesting. So you were published in a textbook to teach Nepal students English. How did the students react to your poetry, or do you know?
Oh, that feedback, I haven't been able to get the feedback, but it was because the book came late after the pandemic, and so now the schools they will I prescribe that textbook. So it is a new, and the the person who asks the poem, so he's a very good poet and he's an academician. So it will take some time before I can hear the feedback. So, and he selected the poem, and it was also approved by the Curriculum Development Center, which is in Kathmandu, Nepal. So it was approved by that. So and it's about the festival. So festival was recently festival got over here in Nepal. So and festival is coming also. We have Festival of Lights and we have Festival of the Sun, where we worship the sun. So I hope the students will like the poem since it has been selected.
So other than students, what other kind of or feedback or comments have been made about your poetry you find striking for yourself?
So there is another poet from Nepal, Rup Singh Mandari. So he also contributed to Literary Parrot and all. So and he said that the poem is very good and he will anthologize it later. So the feedback, it's a good poem, I think. So they have analyzed it in that way, like it's a good poem. So that's why you include it in the textbook. So it must have something must be there.
Yeah, I think so. I've read the Poetic Burden for myself. You sent me a review copy, and I believe I did a blurb for that. And I think it's excellent poetry. I liked it when I read it. I thought it was, it's a cut above the average, definitely. There's a lot of poetry being published, and there's a lot of it that lacks the elevated quality you speak of. It's a lot of confessional mismatch and stuff, and it's there's just so much out there, and you can only so much has the essence of the thing. So what are some of your favorite poetry journals contemporary to read right now?
Favorite poetry journals,
or just literary journals in general?
Literary journals. So for poem, I think there are there's no specific journal which I'm referring to, but Inspired was one, and where I was looking, and Borderless also in the beginning days, and even now for prose and all. So Borderless is good, and even I go into all kind of that I see on the Facebook, and I go through them, and Lothlorien Poetry Journal, it is also a great one. So yeah.
Are there any poets you've read, contemporaries that you've read recently in these journals that just you love their work that just stands out for you?
Yeah, I love Ryan Quinn Flanagan. I love his work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah, so, and there's Louise is also there. Louise Bezriobal, I think.
Not familiar with her, I don't think.
Yeah, so Ryan is there, and John Druz is also there.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and Gopal Lahiri also. So his poems from India. So they are very abstract poems. They do very Gopal Lahiri, and also they do very abstract kind of poems, and that quality I am trying to work with my poems also. The abstract quality in the poem.
Takes quite a bit of time. It's an effort, really. I write pretty abstractly sometimes, and then I've got to where I'm moving more towards a sort of democratic, ethos to my poetry. I want to be more, direct and sensuous rather than trying to make people think overly about what I'm writing about. I shift around quite a bit, so in my poetic styles. But I look forward to seeing you writing in abstract and see how that turns out for you. It sounds interesting. So, other than the contemporaries, do you have favorite? And you mentioned Walt Whitman, of course. Do you have favorite poets in the canon or classical poets, worldwide that you?
I like Walt Whitman, and I like Dylan Thomas. The Raising Against the Dying of the Light, that poem. And there's another poem also. I forgot the name right now. So, and Dylan Thomas, So, and I was also looking into William Carlos Williams, his work.
Yeah.
That poem about the plum, in the refrigerator and all.
Yeah. Very famous poem, actually. It's his poetry really kind of shook America quite a bit, the poetic community quite a bit, because it was something really unique and new at the time. And it's sort of in the Whitman-esque tradition of the democratic ethos, very fascinating poet. One of my favorites is Wallace Stevens of the American, branch of literature. I love Wallace Stevens. You probably like him too if you've read him.
Hmm.
Yeah, he's an interesting. He writes abstractly and very enigmatically, so he's quite a fascinating poet to read for that reason.
Wallace Stevens. So yeah.
So, what is your editing process like? Do you go? I mean, when you write a poem, is it just sort of like you just stick with it, or do you go through and kind of cut at it and chip away and chisel, or do you and how long does it take? I mean, it's and in your books. I mean, how long did it take your your two books when you did them? What was your editing process like, and how long and how long did that take you to put those books together?
Yeah, so editing process, it's not, I don't edit much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just write spontaneously, and I just try to make the sentences sound good. So I write spontaneously, and for my after so it took 1.5 years to work on the first book, and the second book was also, for the second book I took me around 3 months.
Mm.
And every poem I write, I send it for publication. And if the language is correct, and if I get to know the craft better, so I try to edit, but it's not. I do not digress the poem and diagnose something. So it's not like a dissection process.
Right. Right. So when you write the poem, it just occurs spontaneously, and you may go and just make sure that grammatically it's good, or that it's not too overblown.
Yeah, the poem should converse with me, if it makes sense to me, and while I'm writing it, so while I'm getting the flow, and every kind of things come up, even similes and metaphors, they come up. So I am like, okay, this poem is going somewhere. I'm saying this thing, and it allows me to think more, as a whole thinking more deeply. And
Right. So do you find that poetry is a sort of a process of self-realization for you, that when you're writing, you just discover something new in your poetry when you're writing it?
yes, exactly.
It's a fun process. You get into the nitty-gritty of it, and that's what it's about for me. It's like the process of writing. You don't know. Sometimes you don't even know what you're going to write about. You maybe a little snag of a language is in your mind, and you think, okay, I'm going to write something. And you start to write, especially when it comes to poetry. You're almost clueless when you go into that. It's like walking into a dark room blind. And then by the time you're done, you've turned the lights on and you can see, and it's so fascinating to me how that works. It's a process of uncovering something. And I find that, like, what happens for me, sometimes a little phrase I'll think of a phrase or a word that's, kind of catches me, and then I'll start writing about it. And sometimes the ideas will just start happening, and then I'll look at it and I'll go, "Wow, how did I do that? How did that happen?" It's magic. It's casting a spell.
Sometimes it's like, if the poem is not really good, then editing is required. So
yeah,
it's even like that.
A few duds here and there. Yeah, it's a process.
Poetry has to be spontaneous.
Mm-hmm. So you have a master's degree. Tell us about what the process was for you for that. What did you study, in getting your master's?
I studied at New Delhi. So before that, I was in Kathmandu. I was doing my BA degree there, BA in Major English, and so it's literature and journalism. So, and after that, I moved to Delhi, and there. But one thing that strikes me right now is that I did not take a poetry course in Delhi. So while I was there, it was mostly prose, and it was novels, and it was James Joyce, Ulysses, and The Handmaid's Tale, and it was science fiction, and so it was mostly prose. So I did not take the poetry course then, because poetry sounded too technical. So there's villanelle and all, every aspect we were doing. So I did not attend the poetry class. So so right now I'm also thinking to write haikus, and also if I get to know the technical aspects. So I wish I had taken the course, technical aspects back then. So it's an English literature course, so it enables you to handle the language, and it's about creativity, because we do many papers there, assignments and all.
Did you like James Joyce?
Yes, Dubliners. I quite enjoy that, and James Joyce, he uh, the is good. He's good. I mean,
I love James Joyce. I've read everything, other than his critical writings. I have a book of his essays and stuff, and I haven't read that, but I read all of his novels and his short stories. And so, to me, he's just like one of the best. It's just hands down. There's just no competing. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back with some of Sushant's poetry. So be prepared for that, guys. We'll see you soon.
I'm at that age where I appreciate every sunrise, sunset, and all the hours in between. The age that causes me to notice the rhythmic timing of each breath. A reminder to thank God for granting me another day. I'm at that age where joints begin to stiffen, and maybe I don't move as fluently as I did at 22. But I'm also at that age where I realize many didn't even get to see today. So I pray on bent and aching knee, thank you, God, for blessing me. I'm at that age where I notice my kids making some of the same mistakes that I did. And I remind myself that although never easy, I made it through, and so will they. I'm at that age where I understand that money never buys true happiness. But I'm also at that age where I understand it definitely does help to have a bit. I'm at that age where six-pack abs still attract. But I'm also at that age where the behavior of a true gentleman will stop me in my tracks. I'm at that age where I know what it means to be a woman alone with how to treat my man. Beginning with listening as he explains what he needs from me. You see, there may be many similarities, but all men are not the same. I'm at that age where I realize good things don't come to those who wait. They go to those who educate, plan, sacrifice, work, and repeat over and over and over again. I'm at that age where I appreciate spending time with family, whether we're on good terms or not. Because I'm at that age where I'm losing so many people that I care about. I'm at that age where I'm bearing down on that age where there are more chapters of my life in past instead of future tense. But I'm at that age where I refuse to give up. I continue to climb, to create, to improve, love, and share, bearing my soul to the universe while honoring my ancestors, my God, and myself, while becoming the best version of me possible, because I'm at that age.
Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the Parrot, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot. Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the Parrot, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV, Parrot TV. Listen to the people, listen to humanity, listen to the Parrot, Parrot TV, 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 Parrot TV.
The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York Parrot TV, the voice for humanity.
Welcome back to the 204th episode of the Literary Corner with Sushant Thapa, and I'm Dustin Pickering. And this is an excellent afternoon for all of us out there reading and writing poetry. We're going to get into the nitty gritty with Sushant and some of his works. We are the best and only TV station offering a global platform for creative writers. So if you guys out there know any creative writers, send them our way. We'll talk more about how to get in touch with me at the end of the program, so stay tuned. Sushant, would you like to share a couple of your wonderful works with us?
Yes, sure. So I have this poem here. It's titled, "What is it that poetry can do?"
Excellent.
For what is it that poetry can do? It can make a single leaf of a tree among many tremble and make you its master. It can let you climb on clouds while you are on the ground and are finding your stand. When your heart aches and you find pain in others, when you stumble and see others falling too, poetry will make you rise and see how lowly mankind lives in poverty and in mind's cave. In politics and in game of same, it will show you how civilizations have crumbled and how mankind has failed to counter disasters like world wars and now corona. Poetry can do all the talking, yet explain in small ways that we exist and our being is questioned by nature time and again. Perhaps poetry is the answer you choose to reply with, empty yet louder, the voice of yourself. Perhaps through poetry, you want us to hear it. Thank you.
Excellent. I especially love that opening image that's captivating. It really, using a natural image and then leading into some of the social questions and that poetry can provide us with. And I love the use of the emptiness and echo and the response back, and all of this that you were describing in poetry. It's fascinating. Excellent work. Would you like to share another one with us?
Yeah, so I will share the poem titled "The Poetic Burden."
Excellent title piece.
Yeah, so
check out his work. If anybody out there, check out Sushant's work and get a look at The Poetic Burden. Excellent work. I recommend it.
Yeah, it's available in Amazon also. So the book, all worldwide. The Poetic Burden. So with a soothing flow and an imaginative glow, a poem comes in between words and is always a delight to uncover and know. Drenched in the burden to compose, nothingness is viewed from a lens sometimes too verbose. Passion and politics, nature and mankind, shame and anguish can all rest below one topic and roof. Figures and figurative languages are sipped slowly like tea from life's cup, a play to understand freely the rules, like a child learning to fuse language and metaphor unconfused. Sometimes a rigid repetition, philosophy, and a mere form of abstraction, silently words carry the poetic burden. Thank you.
I think when I hear the phrase "the poetic burden," and the poem itself defines that in a way that's the poetry itself has a burden because it's a weight. I also think of the poetic burden as the weight on the poet to write, and so it's a twofold sense to me. Mostly, it seems like in the poem itself, you're talking about the various ways that poetry can contain so much knowledge and information in one thing, in one hit. You read it, and you can interpret it many different ways, and so that's the poetic burden. But I also think of the social responsibilities of a poet and the responsibility to write and to be the artist. And that seems like that's almost like a given. If you're an artist, if you're serious about your craft, it's sort of ingrained in you. There's no way of escaping it. It's just what you are. It's your destiny, and there's no way out. It's like I've known that from my own experience. I don't know about how you feel about that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if you are a poet and you have a certain outlook, so you cannot tie that outside. You cannot keep that outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. You are living with it, so you have certain ideas. So I understand. Yeah, that's
absolutely. How would you describe your evolution through your two books as a poet? Did you maybe shift styles? Are you going another direction? You see, when you're reading your own work?
So as far as the critics, so you have also said that my first book, it is about romanticism. So you have said that there's a romantic voice in it, and another critic from Kathmandu, so he has also said that there is a romantic voice in it. So that first book was about the self and it's about the meaning, and second one, it's abstraction. So, and I have talked about more, abstract things which do not have concrete appearances. So things like that, and feelings. So from a theoretical point of view, so from the meaning of the self to the to talking about feelings and things, so it's a complete shift, I would say. So, and I, when I write the poems, I equally send them for publication. So I do that over a certain period of time, and I collect my poem, and then I formulate a book. So but there has been some sort of change, more abstract qualities also, and more lighter kind of verses. For my third book also, it is in the press, so more lighter. And poetry for me is about wisdom also in the abstraction and other poems in this book. So this about the wisdom also. So it
Excellent.
ends with
I love that
wisdom.
cover. It's very colorful.
Yeah, so it has been published from Inspired from UK.
Okay. So, what do you think? In terms of you're talking about wisdom in poetry, and we've talked a little bit about the poetic burden in the sense that it contains so much knowledge. How do you think poetry? Yeah. How do you think poetry is able to do that?
So I would like to recite a poem. So it's called
Okay.
The Story. The Story. So it's about the Akbar and Birbal, the story of the Akbar and Birbal. So I have made that into a poem.
Okay.
So it has some kind of wisdom. So
It's a good
now
example.
the story.
Mhm.
We cannot keep drifting clouds as a spot of stark fort to hide something precious on the ground. That's because clouds, they sift.
Mhm.
So there is a distance, although free fall measures the distance between the sky and the ground. The clouds sift above. Even if you hide your golden precious ring in the sand below, you will lose the cloud in the air. Do not take the cloud as a stationary object. Regarding it, do not hide any precious object on the ground of sand. This was the moral of a story which read long ago in the sand of time. For all ages, it can set an example. Like the escaping sand, the story sleeps for the wisdom worthy of unattained kingship. A new wisdom it is if fitted for friendly words and appreciation thereafter. It would benefit many from the story. The sand of time was just an earthly reflection of the story. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's an excellent piece. It makes me think timelessness. That's the word that comes to mind with that theme of that poem, and how what we call the world that the world we live in is a reflection of the metaphysical and abstract reality. And that's what I gather from the poem. Interesting way of putting it, with you saying bearing in the sands of time and things of that nature. So poetry is like actually taking all of the most noble aspirations and noble feelings of humankind and putting them in a timeless piece that presents to people over the future, generations of readers and writers to aspire to. That's my feelings for it. And I think when you write that, when I read that, hear that piece, I think of the piece by Percy Shelley, Ozymandias, and how at the end, the empire has crumbled into the sand, and the power dynamic is just gone. It doesn't matter anymore. So what is power to, that kind of power? And the poetry lasts. The poetry of Shelley, for instance, is we still read it, we still love it, and even though it's these powerful people seem so you can envy them, but it's an illusion, really. Are they really in control? Are they really as powerful as they appear? So I think poetry is one of the things I like about poetry is it's able to dissolve these illusions and thoughts and put them in and distill so much wisdom, like you just did in that poem. Distill so much in an abstract way where you're led to think about it and reflect on it. It's an excellent poem. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what do you think the poet's role for society is, and how do you think you go about fulfilling that?
So the poet's role is to develop a consciousness.
Mhm.
So from the language, and consciousness in thinking, and consciousness in reasoning. So there is a lot of functions. So
Mhm.
poet just reflects the society, and so like sailing to the Byzantium and all, we have those kinds of
Mhm.
poems. And so even prose written in the metrical form. So in Nepal, so this Munamadan was there. It was a novel written in a metrical form, so it was one of the best.
Mhm.
Still people read it. So so there is a consciousness. So poet and intellectual capacity is also there with the poets. So
Mhm.
because they can analyze and they can show a new way, uh, and some motivation, and so there's a responsibility, the poetic burden. So talking of my book also, so
Mhm.
it's called avivara. Avivara is the Nepali word, so that is for the responsibility, for
Mhm.
you to uphold that burden. Are you
Yes.
ready to uphold that burden or not? So the poetry has a function.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you said, and that's where I was thinking when I heard the title, "The Poetic Burden." That's what I thought of as sort of like there's the responsibility. A responsibility is a burden, but at the same time, it's you. If when you fulfill that burden, there's a fulfillment to it, and if you live to the standard of of being a poet, and you have poet as a model of virtue. What another thing I love about reading poetry is all these enigmatic phrases that mean you're so ambiguous. They can mean so many things. And in your own work, that the last poem you read, for instance, it's a very distinct metaphor, but at the same time, you can read into that so many ways, you know. And so you can derive from just that one simple image at the beginning, like the ring in the sand, and you don't bury your ring, your treasure in the sand. You can come from that. You can make that personal. You can make that more universal. And so poetry to me has the capacity to extend beyond people in the realm that we're in and elevate consciousness, as you said. So, how do you feel that poets, like, how do you feel they should respond to political realities?
Yes, they can. They should reflect the political realities, and it should be like an art. It should not be like preaching or something, that I have learned over the time. I have learned that poetry is different from preaching. And
Mm-hmm.
so talking about the political things, like in some form it can be reflected in the art. So let us not lose the art factor while depicting something political. So I think that would be it should come as a figment. For me, I reflect poetical, I mean political things in my poems, but it comes as a figment and it comes in the art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree that you don't want to be too preachy. You don't want to come out as like a standing on your pedestal and saying do this, do this, do this, or don't do this, or act this way, or that kind of poetry. It's just that kind of writing is really dreadful. No one likes being preached at like in that manner. You want to be enlightened and elevate people's consciousness and make them think about and reflect on themselves in a way that other art forms can't do.
So I have a poem called "Protest and Poetry."
Okay.
Now protest and
Reading?
poetry. So yes, I will read. So it
Mhm.
is it is about politics, but
You're watching Parrot Literary Corner. Dustin Pickering with Sushant Thapa here, and he's going to read us a poem.
protest and poetry. Here, fought is the peace, raised is the weapon of tussle. A fight lasts in politics of mutuality. Reconciliation and seeds of thought get killed before they germinate to the health of the nation. When poetry becomes protest, artist dies a silent death. Nation demands protest to become poetry, to flow like the consoling stream, to wash its people with conscience, patience, and responsibility. A thousand death lives inside the artist when he searches his own country in his art. It sounds patriotic, although an artist forgets the attribute of his craft and keeps beautifying the pain of his heart. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Quite an interesting work. I was thinking, when it comes to the political side and as we talk about preachiness and there's like this model, this contemporary model of poetry as social justice, and there's the dynamic of oppressed and oppressor. How do you feel that could raise consciousness?
Yes, we can. Poets can raise consciousness, So, and so I think it will involve some sort of preaching, so indirectly, but it should reflect what is going on. So we should
Right.
not stop. If political wrongdoings, we cannot justify them.
Right.
And pain has to carry that. Pain has to carry the words, and it has to touch. It can create awareness, or it can just reflect the society, the current situation, political situation, and also the thing which you are doing in the New York Parrot, the social theme of the poetry, and also those kinds of poems. If they are, if we are encouraging, it is better, much better. Yeah.
Right. That's one of the aims of the New York Parrot, is to present political and social realities in poetic form, and through the literary corner and through our interviews.
That's a different realm, which we do not want to miss. If all
right,
besides the personal poetry and theoretical poetry, so and we have to diversify,
Right, absolutely. There's so much that we could be talking about in poetry that would leave the space open for people to throw their voices in. What would your final message be to our viewers today?
So keep writing, be creative, keep reading, and find your new ways of knowledge patterns. That is what I would like to say. So find your new ways of knowledge patterns. Shift from poetry reading to novel reading or writing, or being aware socially and politically. So my message would be that you should be aware politically and socially. As a poet, we just don't have to always worry about our art or craft. So we have to be aware socially and politically, and we have to do the writing. So let us not stop writing.
Absolutely. So do you have any shout outs you'd like to, some thank yous you'd like to give to, your audience or your friends and family who've supported you over the years?
Yes, so I'm really fortunate to share this platform with you here, and people are watching. So I would like to thank all of them, and my relatives, my parents, and for trusting in me, and for encouraging me to write more, and all of those literary platforms. So I would like to thank, from this platform, I would like to thank them. So they are still accepting my works, and it has been a lot of motivation. And so thank you for that.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Sushant. It's been wonderful talking with you, and I think we got quite a bit out of your poetry and your experience of poetry. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner, and I'm Dustin Pickering. This has been our 204th episode milestone. We're just going to keep pushing this and keep going until we reach infinity. So if you want to support this program and our production costs and so forth, you can do so by donating at paypal.me/nyparrot, and that's right there on that banner. If you'd like to be a guest, as I mentioned earlier in the program, or you would like to suggest guests, you can reach out to me, Dustin Pickering, at New York Parrot, or Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. So if you want to join us as a guest, just don't hesitate. Don't be shy. We're friendly. We won't bite you. We won't yell at you. Well, we're nice people, and we'd love to hear from you as contributors to our platform as well. So if you have social or political edged poetry, feel free to submit to the New York Parrot through that exact same email, literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. So as I said, this is the 204th episode milestone of the New York Parrot Literary Corner. And this is such an amazing thing we've been doing. We've just been pushing this and just going. So we want to keep it going. So we need more guests. So please just don't hesitate at all to be in touch. And keep a lookout for our anthology coming out, Series 2 of the Literary Parrot, which will be just as exciting as the first. And it will contain new voices from the guests of our previous episodes. And you guys out there are wonderful. Thanks to our viewers. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube station and you're viewing right now, please subscribe. Just hit that button, right there. And it's no cost, no fee. You don't have anything to lose. So please subscribe and suggest us to other people. Share this video let's get these words out. Let's talk about Sushant's poetry. Let's talk about the Parrot Literary Corner, and let's just keep the conversation moving on poetry and writing. This platform is for all creative writers. So if you're a novelist, a playwright, dramatist, anything, you write, you want to be heard, you want to talk about your ventures in poetry and writing and creative writing and literature, and what you're doing, what you're trying to say to the world, what literature means to you. We have a platform for you. Don't feel ignored. You've got a space. So please be in touch with me, again, at literarycorner@newyorkparrot.com. I'm Dustin Pickering. Have a lovely day, guys. Don't forget to read and write.
Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Parrot TV. Listen to the people. Listen to humanity. Listen to the parrot. Parrot TV. 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 Parrot TV.
The Literary Corner, brought to you by New York.